Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Being none, all in favor of accepting the minutes? as written?
Aye.
Aye. Next on the agenda, and it is 7:05, is a liquor license transfer hearing. Is Dennis here yet, Jaleesa? Michael can swear him in then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have a liquor license transfer. It's a public hearing for 363 Main Street. James and Angela Vanass to SCC Corp., DBA Birded Hill Market, with Charles M. McGrath as the proposed manager. If the parties, are they here? I saw Jim. Okay. If you folks could come forward. Michael, would you like to, it's a public hearing, do you need to swear these fine folks in?
Okay.
Actually, if you could each introduce yourselves with your address for the secretary, just for the record, for the hearing as well, so you could start to the, my right.
Jim Vanass, 363 Main Street, Clinton.
Angela Vanass, 363 Main Street, Clinton.
Charles McGrath, 10 Turner Ridge Road, Marlboro, Mass.
What we want to do is, this is a public hearing, so we ask that you be sworn in. If you can raise your right hand, just indicate that all the information and testimony that you'll give during this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay, this is the, this is for a package store liquor license, so as an on-premise license holder, I don't have to recuse myself, so I can participate on, as a member of the board for this hearing. It is a public hearing, so what we'll do is we'll afford Charles an opportunity to speak. Obviously, if Jim and Andrew want to say anything, you folks can too. Maybe you can give us an idea as to what your plans are with the business. We'll open it up to the public, ask any members of the public that are proponents or opponents to the transfer an opportunity to speak, and then we'll close public hearing and take action.
Okay. Don't expect any big changes. Going to continue same size, same operation, same hours as the Vanessas have been running it over the past few years. I currently own a package store, variety store in Hudson, Massachusetts. Been there 4.5 years. In the process of selling that business, so this will be my only business at the time. One will be gone when we take this one over. Look forward to meeting with people in the town. It seems like a nice family atmosphere. That's the way we want to keep it. And if there's any questions from the board as well, I don't know anything specific that I can answer for you.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll afford the public, and then we'll
Sure.
allow the board. How's that? Jimmy or Andy, you guys have anything you want to add?
No, other than the fact that Angie and I have met Chuck and Sandy several months ago, and they seem very interested in the business and carrying on in the same tradition. We're very happy about that. You know, we think we've worked very hard up there to build a nice little business up, and we just wish them the best.
Okay. With that, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this package store liquor license transfer?
I do, sir. My name is Esteban Mendoza, 104 Street. I talk to the town.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the transfer? Being none, I'll turn it to anyone in opposition to a transfer of the package store license. Being none, I'll close public comment and open it up to the board. Does any members of the board have any questions for Charles?
I just want, you're gonna have still the deli part?
Absolutely.
So I've been going to them for years, and they make great food, so I want to make sure everything stays the
You
same.
can't get rid of Mary's meatballs.
All right,
Not at all.
that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
No, I don't have any questions. I'm sure Jim and Angela have done an incredible job making, as Jim said, a great new business, and I hope that Jim and your wife and, well, I'm sorry, I said Jim, Charles,
Thank
and
you.
your wife, Sandra, will do as well, and I just wish Jim and Angela all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Having owned a small business and having sold a small business, I know how the Vanassus feel right now. It's a little bit of a relief. Good luck to all parties.
Thank you.
Yeah, also, best of luck and great success up there. Run a good, solid operation. Carry on the tradition of that family, and you'll be doing great things for the town of Clinton. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we grant the transfer.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Good luck up north. We are still tracking on schedule. Next up, we have a common particular license hearing for 300 High Street. Richard, I'm going to crucify your poor name here. Aravidas? And I do apologize.
Yeah.
Is he here?
I don't believe he's here. This is
Okay.
just one, what we've been doing is going through, cross-checking Board of Health records, selectmen's records, building permits and records, and trying to find out which establishments aren't up to date on certain licenses. Last week, we had one of a gas station. We did come across that we don't have a current license on file for Lincoln Drugs that have been operating for years down there. So it's not anything different, it's just making them officially have the common victual license and pay the fee and that type of thing.
They just lapsed for this year. They haven't been operating for numbers of years. Or...
I don't know I don't know how far back we can find out when when the breakdown was, but it's just to kind of get them back on our license list and paying the fee and doing all that.
Yep. Okay, this is also a public hearing for the license, so I do open it up for public comment. If there's anyone that would like to speak in favor or against issuing this common particular license for Lincoln Drug. Being none, I'll close public comment.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to grant the common victuals license.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next up, Mike, we have the license hearing for Eugene Park, DBA Sweet Hut Restaurant. Are they here?
Yes, I believe it's
Okay.
one minute after that. Yeah.
If you'd like to come forward and state your name for the record. If you could state your name and address for the secretary, please.
Denise A. Russell, 7 Central Avenue, Sterling, Mass.
Okay. If you could, again, this is a public hearing, it'll be relatively brief, just the request for the particular license as a restaurant. We'll open it up for public comment, both pro and con, answer any questions from the board, and then we'll take action.
Okay.
Okay? So I'll turn it over to yourself.
Well, we shut down to clean up the place. A lot of renovations, a lot of new equipment. I'm hoping to gear it towards the people who are on fixed incomes, not looking to make millions. I was born and raised in this town, and I'd just like to bring into the town a place where they could have a good home-cooked meal and not have to mortgage their home to do it.
Okay. Anything else? We'll open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment, either pro or con? Being none, we'll close public comment. Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to accept this.
Second.
Second. Under discussion, I will recuse myself being a restaurant owner, so I won't, just in case there's an ethics issue. But I do wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you very
down at
much.
At your location. All in favor?
Aye.
One abstain. Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we have a common particular license for Remedio Mendoza, doing business as High Street Grocery. If you could please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
If you could state your name and address for the secretary, this is a public hearing.
My name is Reveriano Mendoza. My address is 429 High Street in Clinton, Mississippi.
At the outset, so that there wouldn't be any controversy over a conflict of interest, the Mendozas are not related. Okay.
As in the other hearings, if you want to just briefly state what your intentions are or goals with your new business for this license, and then we'll open it up for public comment. If anyone in the audience wants to speak pro or against, you're getting the license. We'll then close public comment, address any questions that you may have from the board, and then we'll take action. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, this is an application for a market, grocery store, whatever one might title it. It is in the old Papacola Zapantis store that gave birth to a great many stores and whatnot in the town of Clinton. And it would be a market, so to speak, in regard to selling all types of groceries, and would be open from, hopefully from 7 to 10. And it would add, I'm not saying how much to the tax base of the town of Clinton, but would certainly add to it. And bringing in any vacant buildings or offices in the town, it certainly would be a plus. And there's not a heck of a lot more than I could add to, and we're open to any questions that you might have.
Okay. I'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of or against this license being granted? Being none, I'll close public comment. Any questions from the board? Any comments? Pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion that we accept the license.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Under discussion, just wish you the very best of luck in your new venture.
Right.
And,
Thank you kindly,
very
Mr.
well.
Chairman, members of the board. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye. Good luck.
Good luck.
Rabiano.
Okay, next on the agenda at 7:24, almost 7:25. Very efficient meeting tonight, I must say. Yes, Attorney Edward Sheridan, if you could come forward, 352 Sterling Street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, first of all, I'd like to thank you for putting us on the agenda on such short notice. We're here tonight before the board as a result of a court order which is in response to a zoning board of appeals matter on an addition that Mr. Stevenson had put on his garage. Just to bring you up to date quickly, back in approximately 2.5 years ago, Mr. Stevenson applied for a building permit, was granted a building permit, acted in good faith, built on that permit above his garage, had it inspected during the process by your building inspector. Your building inspector assured him everything was okay a number of times. He completed the structure basically on the outside. It was all framed, closed in. He expended thousands of dollars to complete that of his own money. And should be noted that Mr. Stevenson is a 100% disabled veteran on a fixed income, lifelong resident of the town of Clinton. He built that structure. Once it was all closed in, the neighbors filed an appeal. They filed a complaint with the zoning board. It went before the zoning board of appeals. They ruled against Mr. Stevenson. We took that matter to Superior Court. It took us almost 2 years to complete the litigation on the matter. The decision finally came down that there is legal precedent where a neighbor has 6 years to challenge accessory structure that's built. Mr. Stevenson, unfortunately, is the recipient of that bad news. He's the person who has invested all his money, acted in good faith with the town of Clinton agent telling him that he could build this. I think the town solicitor who's sitting over here, he was involved in all of these proceedings. I think he will agree that what I'm presenting to the board is absolutely factual. According to Mr. Stevenson, he did everything he wanted to. He did everything legal that he thought he could do. He was not intending at any time to put something up behind anyone's back. He was open in what he was doing. As a result of his acting in good faith, it's backfired on him to the point now where he's been given 30 days to receive the necessary permits to demolish and remove that structure, and 90 days thereafter, he has to complete the demolition. What we're here today before the board is, even though it's a legal decision, I have a hard time seeing it as a just decision. And I think there is some liability here on the town of Clinton. I think the town owns some liability, morally if not legally, okay? And I would ask that the town consider if there are available funds to assist Mr. Stevenson in demolishing and removing that structure. Again, he's a 100% disabled Vietnam veteran. He's been commended by generals. He's on a fixed income. He's not in good health. And he really is getting the short end of the stick here, I believe. So I would ask the board, first of all, for the necessary permits and, whatever we need to get for those permits. He intends to comply with the court order. We're asking for the town to somehow subsidize him for his situation.
Do you have a cost estimate as to what the cost of removal will be?
I would guess it would be in the area of probably about $10,000 or $12,000. We could get estimates and bring them up, but I would imagine, I know that, it does cost some money to take it off and to remove it, to dump it. So.
I think that was all targeted through the grant application.
Yeah, I don't know if, Dennis, do you know if, via the demolition money that we have, any means, or Donnie, you're here in the audience, any means that we could target any of that funding towards that structure being not complete and unsafe, or?
Mr. Chairman, as far as the grant money from the state goes, the site would have to be determined to be a slum or blight, which an addition would not fit that terminology. However, I would remind the board that it's my understanding that the town has a $25,000 line item for demolition, of which $9,200 was taken to knock down the Maybarker property. So we do have about $15,000, $16,000 left there. And with the imminent sale of the Maybarker, that $9,200 would be returned to the town, recaptured by the town and returned to that fund. So you would have still $25,000 to work with out of that. And I would suggest that that might be a more advantageous avenue.
And just as an update on the May Barton issue, I did receive a letter from Paul Suschek, the person who was handling that sale, and he had indicated to me today via letter that their sale is imminent, and he wanted to know what the updated figure was that was owed to the town, so we should be getting that money back that was expended on that purpose. So that should be coming in the near future.
Mark, the law committee met on this, and the law committee was willing to settle for a reasonable amount. And Mr. Stevenson, through his attorney, asked for what I felt was an outrageous amount. So he rolled his dice and went to the court, and he lost. In my opinion, he should get zero.
I like to talk. Sure, you can speak, Mr. Chairman.
I asked the building inspector came up and told me 5 times that it was legal. 5 times. And during the process, I went out back of the house, and I asked him why I shouldn't stop putting any more up. And he said, it's perfectly legal, and I'll go to court for you. And he didn't show up at court. Now, no matter how you figure this, I am not looking for money from the town for anything that I don't deserve. I put money into that building and with the good intention of having it. And I got the permit right here to show you that he signed the permit and everything, and kept coming back and telling me it was perfectly legal and that he'd go to court for me. He went one time to court, and I didn't want to go before that particular judge. And the second time, he never showed up.
And in all due respect, we're not looking for a settlement here. That was when the matter was in dispute. It's not in dispute anymore. What we're looking for here is some kind of assistance to comply with the court order. We're not looking for damages or intentional or emotional distress or anything else here. We're looking for simply the demolition and removal of the structure.
I would think if and it'll be the pleasure of the board, but maybe getting 3 quotes on what the cost of taking the building down and then bringing that forward for us to at least consider. Not that I can guarantee any action from the board, but at least give us some figures to look at. And if we have funds potentially available that are already set aside for demolition in general, maybe we can consider it. But I think just having if we have some numbers to look at, more than 1 quote, I think that would be at least fair for us to. And again, I'm not committing that would do anything.
We held off getting the figures actually until, first of all, I was saying if there was any money available or any avenue available, and obviously there is.
Yes.
So we have no problem. We'll get 3 estimates and present them to the board for your consideration.
Again, I wouldn't take that as that we're going to do it, but more of a, I think, information and fact gathering on your part to provide us at least the information to be able to make a decision. So I just caution that we're not rubber stamping that we'll do this. Morally and justice don't always get along.
Well, I would like to tell you that he told me to get a lawyer too. And when I got this lawyer, he told him it was legal, right?
He did.
So, this is really stupid on the part of your building inspector.
Well, and again, I think, all people are human and sometimes mistakes are made. And what we can do is if we're given the right facts and we have funds and the majority of the board is willing to work with you, I think that will ultimately be the goal. But, our building inspector tries his best and
I'm not fighting the wrong or right of the building.
The court's already ruled.
Right.
Yeah.
So we won't get involved with that.
We're here to comply with the court order. We're not arguing the right or the wrong of the decision. So we're not going to, and nor will we debate that. The facts are that the ZBA had one position that the court upheld. Our building inspector, in good intention, was supporting and inspecting things.
it was a mistake made, but legally there's issues there that don't involve recourse. So now it's more of a matter of, can we afford, and do you have the numbers to allow us the opportunity to make a decision to help you?
Okay.
So we're not saying no tonight.
I appreciate your consideration.
What we'd like to do is just get some numbers in front of us to look at, okay?
All right.
So we're not saying no, we won't entertain it or anything like that. We just need to, if we can have a few, 3 quotes at least to look at, that'll allow the board an opportunity to
That's fair.
find
That's
the
fair, and we'll be
resources.
happy to get those and get them back to you as soon as
I've
possible.
been working as a carpenter since I was 11 years old. I'm 73 now, and I'm sure that nothing is wrong with the building, except that he says it isn't legal, that's all.
Okay, so we'll do that and get back to the board.
Judges say that.
If I guess we'll entertain that as a direction from a pleasure of the board. Is there a vote or
I'll make a motion make a motion that we have the 3 estimates for next meeting.
Is there a
We'll
second?
take action that on the next meeting.
Just in the discussion, I'd
Yeah.
like to say, even if the quotes come in, I am personally not committing myself to it. I'm not so sure that I even believe that it's the town's responsibility to pay for the demolition of that building, but
Well, I think he has a legitimate argument, though, that
well, and
the
I
building
have
was...
I have a
Right,
legitimate
yeah.
right to say that I'm publicly saying that I'm just, the board votes in favor, but I'm not saying.
Right.
I'm committing, that's all.
And I'm just saying, I think before the board makes any decisions, we need to have at least 3 quotes to look at. So that we're all in, we have enough views on what.
That's
what
certainly
possibly-
reasonable, and we accept that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible to know what the amount that the law committee offered?
No, it doesn't.
There was no offer made.
There was no offer. And it's.
There was no
that's-
counter offer by the law committee.
So there was a motion made and seconded to request Mr. Sheridan, our Attorney Sheridan, to bring forward 3 quotes from Mr. Stevenson for our next meeting. If you could do that, that'd be great. All in favor?
I would just like to advise the board, I won't be available the next 3 Wednesday nights. So whenever your next meeting
Okay.
is.
If you could supply.
I will supply them up here, so you'll have them. I'll give them to Joe Lisa.
That would be fine. All in
Okay.
favor of that?
Aye.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you. And I understand. And I wanted to get that quote too, but more importantly, to get at least a view of the numbers. Okay, administrator's report, minus the administrator. Yeah.
Jolie, so on-
A couple flower beds.
Do you know how much is allowed for that week's fund for the flowers? Do you have a price?
Michael, we're at the administrator's report.
Okay, great. Sorry to keep the board waiting. Just a couple of items for the board's review. The first is late night closings for the month of May. We've received letters to date from Crystal Cafe, Gale House Grill, Jack's, The Old Timer, Ringside Cafe, Scooby-Doo's, and Talk to the Town.
Also move, Mr. Chairman.
It's the pleasure of the board.
Also move.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
One abstain.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is a request from the Weeks Fund trustees for approval to use the Parks and Recreation Commission to plant flowers at Woodlawn Cemetery. This is to comply with the bequest of the Weeks Flower Fund. Currently, they have the work done by a private company in town. That company was doing it as a favor to them because it is a small job. I think it's only about $200 or $300 a year, I think it is. And now the cost of the private vendor doing it is starting to exceed the amount of money per year that they have to fulfill this will of Mr. Weeks. So the Parks and Recreation Department has offered to do it. They would provide the labor, and it would only cost the cost of the plants and the flowers, which would be within the money. They use the interest every year off of that bequest, and the cost of the material would be within the budget that they would have allowed. So Mrs. Plesky had come up and asked if just that it's being done up front, that it's gotten approval, and that she knows that she would like to make this change, but she wanted the approval to do that. So.
Pleasure of the board. Is there a second? Second. Under discussion, I have discussed with the Parks and Rec director, actually in the hall here. I just had a quick question if she was okay with it. But I would think they would want to have a vote from their board, Michael.
Oh, okay.
The Parks, accepting the responsibility. It says here that they've already talked, but I would think they would want to have a formal acceptance on their end.
Sure.
To make sure that, they're on board with doing it and they're responsible for doing it.
Okay.
Well, we can vote that we approve it, but
Yeah, to
it
approve
really,
the recommendation.
nothing occurs unless the Parks and Rec accepts the responsibility of doing it, for we have no direction over the Parks and Rec.
Yeah, and this came to the selectmen because the Weeks Fund trustees are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, so they're just going through their appointing board for approval.
So, motion's been made and seconded, and again, in the discussion, just a request that the Parks and Rec take formal action on accepting that responsibility as well. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. The next is a request from the Tribute Road Race Committee for permission to hang a banner on High Street advertising the annual Tribute Road Race, which will take place on Saturday, May 11th here in Clinton, beginning at the old high school, which is a road race around town. I think they may have already have gotten the fire department to put the banner up, but we just wanted the formal permission to allow that.
What's the pleasure of the board?
So move that we...
Let the banner keep. Under discussion, I did talk to the fire department. Did like to see Michael, and I'm not sure who we deal with, whether the DPW or if those guys can investigate it themselves, putting like threaded rods on. First of all, get a standard size banner that we request. All of the different agencies that want to use or put banners up, get a set length of the banner and put basically like a threaded rod with eye hooks on both ends so that the banners don't twist in the wind. Kind of keeps them stable. That was a recommendation by the fire department that we do something along those lines. So if you could.
Okay. Sure, and if we could talk to them about specifically what hardware, where it should go, and we can try and make that
and then if we have a particular length when we do have requests, or we could just, publicly notify everyone that, if people want to have a banner, it's 20 feet long and it's got to be, X inches wide. Yeah. So, did we take the vote, or we just we took the motion? All in favor? Aye. I don't expect to win that race, but I might walk it. All the new business?
And if you want me to keep going. Yep. Yeah, we have a letter from a Paul St. George from Clinton offering to serve on the Town Hall Building Use Commission. We have 3 members on that. The board had expressed a desire to increase that to 5, so we have one more person that's put their name in.
I'll second.
Just on the discussion, I know 3 or 4 people that want to get their names in on this thing, and I just don't know if we could give ourselves a couple weeks and get a pool. It's, we're kind of doing onesie twosie. Mm-hmm. If we have advertised again?
Yeah, there has been a notice in the paper. with I think it was a 2-week deadline a little ways back, and we only had 2 responses to that at that point, so. And then at the last meeting, we had a gentleman in the audience that offered to serve.
They want to get on it and then not taking action on it.
I would say we appoint Mr. St. George and then everyone picks for one person, and they need to get the letters and then we appoint.
We've got the 4 now, right? That's one.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, unanimous. So we have 1 spot left.
One, you're right, exactly.
So I'll have to make sure those people that are chomping at the bit actually get their damn letter in. Excuse my language.
The next is a request from a Class 2 motor vehicle dealer license holder in town for the property at 604 Main Street. They're looking to change the business name from Depot Square Auto Repair to Friendly's Auto Sales and Service. Under the renewals earlier this year, they had expressed the desire to change the name, but they hadn't picked one yet, or they hadn't filed a business certificate, so they had just recently done that, and they're asking if they could change the name now on their license. They've changed the name of the business, and we're looking to amend the license to include this.
Okay, pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, also.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Thank you. The next is, I just want to pass out a draft warrant for the board. I'm not looking for any discussion or action, obviously, on this tonight. It's just for review. The only thing was, at last meeting, there was a letter from the Board of Assessors relative to an article they're putting forward, and they just asked the ability to come in tonight to talk about that. And I think there are a couple of members of the board that are, or the full board actually is here, and just kind of wanted to discuss that article a little bit with the selectmen. On this article itself, it would be actually number 9 on page 2. But again, this is just for the board's information tonight, and we can talk about it at the next meeting. I think there might be one more article we're working on, an easement article that we can add to that, so it's still a draft at this point. But both of them are standard articles, and on the second page on the bottom is the assessor's article that we'd like to, just to have a discussion with the board tonight as to why they submitted that.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, Vice Chairman, members of the board.
We'll turn it over to you, David, if you want to speak to the article and explain it.
Essentially, we're here just to try to clarify the reasoning behind the whole process of revaluation and where it came from and where it's going. The main reason that we're here tonight is to discuss budgeting processes throughout the state and local government. And because of expected shortfalls with the state, this is the year that we particularly need to pay close attention to the reval, since the property tax in town is where most of our income is generated. So without the revaluation, we can't validate values with the state. Therefore, we can't set a tax rate, hence we can't collect tax revenue. So I mean, it's a very important subject. The bottom line for us this year comes down to a lack of qualified sales and comparable sales for commercial industrial properties. Historically, in the past, the board has hired out, since the reval was mandated via Proposition 2.5 in 1981, has hired out outside contractors to do the entire reval process. That was the case in '97, where the town spent over $140,000 to put in place a computer-aided mass appraisal system. And that was mandated by the state. It wasn't something that the Board of Assessors thought would be fun to spend $140,000 on, but it was mandated that it be done. In 2000, the board spent $54,000 to do a complete cyclical reval, which was required again every 3 years. This year, we're proposing a fee or a total cost of $34,000, where the current board has gained enough experience and qualifications to manage all of the residential properties and personal property accounts. The problem again lies in the industrial and commercial properties, which are very unique, and Clinton is somewhat unique in its makeup, as I'm sure you're all aware. It has a fairly large commercial base that needs to be valued. Now, the Department of Revenue standards get tougher and tougher every year, and we can only have a spread of values between 90 and 110% of fair market value, or 5% COD, coefficient of dispersion, over the median range. So I know that's a lot of math and statistics, but it's very difficult to get data to develop those values. In the last 2 years, we've had 5 commercial and resident and industrial sales. And of those 5, we've had 0 compliance for income and expense statements, where those are mechanisms that we develop economic rents from, and we don't have any to correlate to those. Now, it's kind of a request by the board, and there's no legal basis that the owners of the buildings have to supply that information. So without correlating values and without sales, you can't use the market approach because there's no sales. You can't use the income approach because there's no income data. The only approach left is the cost basis. Now, the cost basis is good if the parcels are new, but as you know, I mean, many of our buildings are 150 years old. And the developed depreciation tables along the lines for properties that are so unique for this town, it's virtually impossible within the limits of the town. So the reason that the board has gone outside since this has been mandated for full and fair cash value is because no expertise exists in the town. And if you look at, I believe you have copies, on page 3 of the documents that I put together for you this evening, I contacted all the towns that are listed here. 5 of those towns hire outside to do the entire revaluation process. 4 of those towns hire out to do the commercial industrial base. Now, those 5 towns that do hire out the whole thing basically have no commercial industrial properties. The 5 that have, or the 4 that have heavy commercial industrial, hire out. And these are fairly big towns. These are towns like Leominster and Fitchburg, who have a good, knowledgeable, experienced staff of assessors, and they still do not have the ability to develop those values. Now, if we were in Framingham, Natick, Boston, it would be a breeze. I mean, we could get the data, we'd have enough data to develop values, but here we don't have that. If we were in those towns, we'd have just the opposite problem. We'd have a difficult time developing values for ranches and capes, because that would be the unique item there, and there may not be enough sales to support that data. So, to make a long story short, we are extremely concerned that if we're unable to satisfy the requirements of the Department of Revenue in a timely fashion, we won't be able to set a tax rate. What that means in the long term, just so you understand the consequence. We can issue a preliminary bill in July, we can issue one in August or September. We can petition the board or petition the Department of Revenue to allow us to issue a 3rd quarter preliminary bill. It's not a given, it's a likely scenario where they would say, okay, you can issue that as long as you're going to develop your values. Now, we don't want to be out in January doing this. I mean, we want to be done in December, which is what's really required. But the likelihood that they would allow us to do that in the event we had a problem is good. So we could probably get through that. After that point, if we cannot certify values to their very strict criteria now, they will not allow us to send out any more tax bills. That's it. It stops. So we effectively will lose our income stream. And that concerns us. And that concerns us. From there, if basically from there, we'll just get all the bad stuff out here. If the values are not in place pursuant to the Chapter 59 standards, via, I think I gave you the articles or the provisions in the Mass General Law, Chapter 58, Section 4A, essentially what happens is the Department of Revenue will petition the Supreme Judicial Court to issue action against the Board of Selectmen to basically force a funding source to make it happen. So obviously we don't want any of this stuff to happen. I mean, we want to get it done the way that it should be done. And it is not unique to Clinton.
Ultimately, all funding gets approved by the town meeting floor, not at the board.
I understand.
So the Supreme Court can lock the 5 of us up, but we don't have the ability to give the check.
I fully agree. And when I read it, I went, "Oh, that's interesting." I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but it says it right there. So
interesting law, but I don't think we have the ability to write you the check unless we have a hidden bank account, which I don't think we do.
Oh, actually, they don't write a check. It's a great mechanism. They take it off of our funding.
Okay.
They subtract whatever. They hire a contractor.
What's your process to get commercially certified with the 3 of you? How far, if you go through this process, where are you? I see a goal of increase or reducing your cost the next go around.
Correct.
How are you going to go about that? What's your educational path for the 3 of you, or is one taking the lead? How's that?
Sure. Actually, I've taken the lead. We're all certified to Department of Revenue standards, which is very vague. It's Class 101, literally Class 101, that says this is how you value properties, but there's no, there's no regressive modeling, there's not commercial industrial modeling. These things aren't part of it. And the whim of the state basically is to throw out a 3-member board of assessors to every town and city and say, okay, you guys are in charge. But effectively, they haven't created any real standards. Now, the Massachusetts Association of Assessing Officers developed those standards, and then there's the International Association. I've gone through 5 of the 6 courses since I've been here. I have 1 more course to go, which will be in the fall. That will give me an MAA certification, which is a Mass Accredited Assessor. Now, that's better, but that's still, that brings me beyond where any assessors have been in the past in the town of Clinton. But that still doesn't give me the data that I need. Really where we need to go is to a commercial mass appraisal, which is my goal, and it will come. Now, there are only 8 of those in the state. So, once again, relatively unique. But it's my goal to get there. Can I do it this year? Absolutely not. Can I do it in 3 years? Yes. So I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can see where we can begin to develop these values, but in that time, we've got to develop relationships with other communities that are similar, that we can share sales. We need to look at Hudson, we need to be able to share things. In Leominster, we need to share things, which brings us beyond, it brings us to a much higher level in the playing field of an assessor. And certainly, I don't think anyone would argue that my salary is overcompensated from a perspective of gathering data throughout the state. I think, and I've never complained about my salary, but it's certainly not, I shouldn't have to fly around the country to develop information for what I'm getting. I think we've all made efforts to get educated as best we can, but it's a big project, and I'm comfortable in saying that I've gone further than anybody else has gone, but nonetheless, we're not there yet. And the risk runs that, so that the board is aware, if I choose not to run again, with the form of government that we have in the assessing department, we're subject to the whim of anyone winning an election. And, we can reset to 0 in a heartbeat, which scares me, certainly.
Any questions from the board? Any comments from the board?
I think David articulated the situation that we have before us. Obviously, rebound is real important, so obviously we have to take real consideration when we review the warrant articles. I can't hear you. I appreciate the fact that you came before us. I think you articulated the points very well.
Thank you.
And I think it's good to see the commitment and the goal of progressing yourself in the department, because that the only feedback that we do hear, and it's not a reflection, it's just when we have reevals, we tend to go out. But as you document it, so does just about everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand.
And that is important for the public to understand that we're not unique in doing that. In fact, almost every single bordering town does exactly what you're proposing to do.
Right.
So, and again, that expenditure gets recouped with adjusted values and accurate values for both the community. So.
Exactly, and that's certainly very important, and that's what we strive to do, is just to be fair and create equitable values.
I have one question for David. You said the whole board is residential certified?
We're actually, they don't make a distinction between residential and commercial industrial. If you complete the 101 valuation courses, which is basically a 5-day seminar where you just get trained to understand the process, you're certified in their eyes.
So the Department of Revenue would look at you folks as being certified to do both a residential and a commercial.
Correct.
Reval.
Yeah.
Right.
The issue is, to the degree of variance that you have to get to, the expertise is not there yet.
Correct.
And this $34,000 you're looking for town meeting is to have a private company come in and do the industrial?
And commercial.
Industrial, commercial.
Yeah, the board, this is the first time the board will be doing all the residential and personal property in-house. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, but there are 4,012 residential parcels, 333 personal property accounts, and 450 building permits. So it's an extensive task, and it will take, the 3 of us to the full commitment till the end of the year to complete that task. But money is tight, and we're going to do whatever we can. But I mean, we certainly realize our limitations and I certainly wouldn't want to jeopardize the income stream in any way by pretending that we could do that.
And do it accurately.
And do it accurately. I mean, we could probably do it, but would it be accepted? Unlikely.
Accepted by the property owner or accepted as a real true value by the Department of Revenue.
Exactly. Interestingly enough, when 2.5 came about, this is when the whole full and fair cash value came about, which was in 1981, they wrote these standards, and back 10 years ago in the assessor's office, everything was done on paper. So they hadn't said you needed a computer system yet that could do statistical analysis. Well, now the computer systems are mandated to be there, and now every year they tighten the level of dispersion from the median tighter and tighter, so it gets harder and harder to develop the values. And, they haven't changed anything along the way, so other than making it more difficult. So it's an interesting process.
Okay. Well, it'll be Article 9 or Article X for sure on the warrant. And we do appreciate you coming before us. One, it begins the process of dialogue for the community too, to at least hear what that article is going to be about. Sure. And I feel confident that it'll be a well-attended town meeting.
I'm sure
with
it
the
will.
budget issues that we'll be facing.
I'm going to practice my speech I just gave you for town meeting.
So you got your dry run in.
Would it be possible, I know there were two other articles that we have proposed. Is that acceptable?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know if, do they have the money?
Yeah.
I certainly don't know the numbers.
Well, based on the draft, there would be numbers 11 and 12. 11 is the 17E.
Okay.
And 12 is 41E.
Okay.
So basically, it's probably
Yeah, I can expand. I was just giving you a moment to read it.
I'm ready for the explanation.
All right.
I took that speed reading for.
Good job. We, as a community, have always discussed doing things for the elderly. And there's a lot of discussion, but a lot of times there's no action. Last year, this became available through a local statutory change that allows the town to adopt a cost of living increase to the values that are developed for the, quote, elderly exemption and for the single surviving spouse exemption. So those values, which are very low, the qualifiers are very low and the benefit is very low. Now, when they were established back in the 60s, they were wonderful. Some people didn't pay taxes at all, and it really meant something. But 30, 40 years later, they mean nothing. Hardly any people can qualify for them because of the strict requirements. And if you do qualify, the benefit is relatively minimal. So we're proposing these two separate articles that would allow us to apply a cost of living increase factor to both the requirement level for assets and income and the benefit. Now, it's based on a consumer price index that's published federally that can range anywhere from negative to a positive 5%. Now, I think 5% is too much. I'm concerned that it will grow rapidly because it does build on the previous year. So I think 3% is a reasonable growth factor that we can use to get these numbers back into the playing field of reality because they're simply just not there.
So that will help them from a qualified, say someone's retirement funding is $13,000 a year.
Right.
They'd get 3% of an increase on that.
Correct. So it would be $13,390.
Okay.
And, would that make many more people qualify? Probably not. Occasionally we've got somebody that's $100 over and it would be nice to be able to have them in there.
But it'd be an effort to go in the direction of helping them.
Exactly. And I'm thinking that, over a 3 to 5 year period, we can get these numbers to be back into a playing field of dollars that are correlating to today's dollars instead of 1960 dollars. So there may be a point where I come to you and I say, I'd like to stop this. I think, we can get to a point and maybe we'll stop. Maybe we'll continue depending on how the economy goes. But I think it's an effort to at least allow the town to give a chance to the seniors to get back into the playing field. And I just ask for your support on that as well.
Well, you'll have that.
Mr. Chairman, I will tell you right now, I think this is really proactive on the board's part, and I think it's a terrific, and I would certainly endorse it.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
think it's,
It's the first good news
Yeah,
regarding
really,
being able to really
absolutely.
take action. You know, it's difficult because, you know,
It's
so often
very
we are
difficult.
hamstrung.
Absolutely.
And to have these kinds of articles be able to come before us, you know, 3% to some people might mean very little, but to those folks, it's huge.
tremendous,
So,
yeah.
I feel quite confident they'll have the board's support on that, just based on.
And I would, if the board wants to entertain changing that 3% to going to the allowable COLA, I'm flexible. I just thought, that I looked at it over a period of time, and I thought that the increase would be reasonable and the expense of the town, because there is some expense, obviously.
Yeah.
Because the state allows for the $175 and the $500 exemption amount. When we go beyond that via this statutory change or local change, we incur those costs. Now, just for the board's knowledge, I took it out, what I projected the cost to be for 2003, $2,000 would be the cost. For 2004, $3,900 is being the cost. So it's very minimal money, but it does grow, of course.
Are you able to extrapolate that to how many people it would benefit?
No, we don't have the income and asset data to really try to correlate.
That would be nice to know.
It would
okay,
be nice to see who would gain
Be affected
and
by it.
benefit from that.
At least the volume of, you know, we're able to help 75
I'd say
seniors in
probably
the
about
community.
40 or 50 people.
40 or 50 is what you'd project?
Possible,
That's,
sure.
that's
Yeah,
a
that would
step
be
in the right
wonderful.
direction.
I mean, you know, 13,000, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's bad. yeah.
I threw, was that an accurate number?
You picked it right on the head.
Okay, that's, I thought it was 13.
Yeah.
So, which is a ridiculous number to try and get by. So if we can help in any way, we should make every effort to, and I appreciate the proactiveness of the board.
Thank you, I appreciate
That's
the
great.
board's support on that. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, folks.
Thanks.
And if, as the board goes through this draft, if there are any other sponsors of articles or any other information that you need to be brought forward to help finalize this, you just let me know.
No.
Now, the next two items are dealing with the Economic Development Office. Mr. Lowe is here to address those, and the following two items would be something that the police chief is here to speak to, so I'll turn it back over to the chairman at this point.
Okay, Donnie, you'd like to come forward on the Director of Economic Development, Director Don Lowe? Hey, Donnie.
I believe the first issue
Is the contract.
I'm sorry?
The contract, the asbestos contract.
Yes. The first issue is something that we touched on at the last meeting, which is the contract that the town solicitor has reviewed relative to being able to test two specific sites in town for potential contaminants, asbestos, lead paint, that type of thing. It was written specifically with the Maybarton property in mind and 525 Water Street, the Hoffman property. As Attorney Sergeant said tonight, we did learn today that it does look like that the sale is a go, and that we have data that the testing has come back and the testing is good. So the prospective buyer has declared that they intend to go forward. So it may not be necessary, probably will not be necessary to test that property, but the contract is written in such a way that, you know, we're preparing for all contingencies, and if something did fall through at the last minute, we still would be able to do it. And just let the town solicitor add if he has any comments on the contract. Or
No, you've articulated the basis, and we've included some language to cover the contingencies. If the sale's going to go forward, obviously, we're not going to expend the funds, but we don't want to incur liability once we enter into the contract, so we have an escape clause that allows us to pull back from the contract if we're not going forward on it. But it allows Dawn to be able to be prepared to go forward if for whatever reason it doesn't go forward and conclude the sale privately.
And the same would hold true for 525 Water Street. It doesn't mean necessarily that we would have to go out immediately and do testing given a certain set of circumstances, but it would give us the ability to do it pretty quickly if we have this contract signed. So that's the intent behind wanting to get this signed and ready to go. And I know there were some questions that the board may have had last time, so.
I think the main one was the the recourse if it went private sale, to make sure that we were able to recoup any funds or not expend the funds. And it sounds like you've covered that.
The procedure would certainly be that we would attach a lien to the property, and upon sale of whichever property, the town would recover that money at that point.
So you're looking for us to approve tonight?
I am, yes. And
Yes, what I think he's asking that you approve it, and then he'll have it available for your signature later on.
Pleasure of the board.
I'll so move, Mr. Chairman. That's to hire the consultant, correct? I'll so move.
Second.
Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Second item.
Bro.
Right. In your packets, you've received a copy of that proposal. I've made one minor change, having been in discussion with them today. No substantive change whatsoever, just a referral to the company as the name and affiliates, because there are subdivisions over there and it's strictly for accounting purposes. I would like to actually hold off on actually taking final action on this until the next meeting.
Okay.
But that is, I just wanted to make sure that the board was comfortable with the language that I used in there relative to the concerns that the board had or issues that the board wanted to make sure was addressed. And I believe I've done that.
Yeah.
But I would ask that we hold off on taking any specific action tonight.
And Dennis, you reviewed it as well, obviously, and you were...
I have a copy of it, yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll hold off on that in regards to Nitro for tonight, and we'll, your goal is to address it and have it completed for next meeting?
It'll be completed for the next meeting, and I'll also have wording for the article on the warrant at the next meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say for town meeting as well. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, Chief Levenger. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening. I guess we got a couple issues here tonight. The first one, I guess that we'll take up would be, we've had several establishments selling alcohol to minors. I'm not sure how the board wants to handle it, but my recommendation would be that each establishment be sent a letter giving a stern warning as to the violations, that the board recommend that they take some alcohol server training, anyone that works in their establishments. I spoke with Mr. McGrail, the owner of the Next Door Market. He's very concerned about the issue. He has offered to print up pamphlets that we could hand out at the schools to the students, telling them of the consequences of buying alcohol. There's a loss of license, and there's a whole pamphlet of all the liquor laws and all the consequences of violating those laws. I'm going to look into getting a videotape also that we could use to educate the children at the high school as to the consequences of the violation of the liquor laws. I think that all the owners are concerned. I don't think anyone was deliberately out there trying to make profit selling to minors, and they're all concerned, and I think they'll take corrective action. And if they don't, we'll continue to conduct these operations, and then the next time we'll handle it differently. And that would be my recommendation. The department has sent people out to alcohol enforcement training. We are going to be keeping a close watch on liquor establishments, that they're not violating the law, and we'll continue to be vigilant in this area. It is a problem, and we're going to try and do something to correct it, reduce the amount of incidents we have of that nature.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just from a procedural standpoint,
Yeah.
I don't disagree certainly what the chief is proposing. My only question would be whether or not we actually have to have a formal hearing in order to impose some of those conditions that the chief is recommending, because there would be avenues of appeal that the people would have. So before we impose those conditions, my only suggestion may be that we put it off until the next meeting so that I can review that with the administrator. And if there's a requirement for a hearing before you do that, for due process reasons, that we comply with that provision.
I thought you wanted a warning.
But I think they were going to intend
informally,
courses
or,
too, if I heard it.
like Mr. Sargent says, I think due process, they have a right to be heard here in case they want to deny that it happened.
So you want to...
But also, if they're going to be required to attend a course and expend funds, I think that that would be, in essence, a punishment. Even though it's on the lower end of the scale, it's still a punishment that I think they would be afforded a right to a hearing. So in the abundance of caution, I would just recommend that you postpone the decision tonight for the next meeting so that I can make a recommendation as to whether or not a formal hearing needs to be set up.
Mr. Chairman, I guess it would be appropriate to move to continue this discussion until our next meeting.
But I concur with the recommendation of the chief. I'm not saying I don't agree.
I don't know whether the board can actually force them to send their help to the alcohol server program. I think that would probably more be a recommendation to the establishments. Again, I think none of them want this to happen. I don't think any of these people are responsible people. I don't think they're doing it for profit. And I think that they're as concerned about it as I'm concerned about it and as you're concerned about it. And they don't want it to happen again. So I think that they will take whatever measures that are recommended. And I'm sure some of them already looked into it.
Yeah.
I know some have.
So then is it appropriate to just continue this, or is it appropriate to take action that we, I guess I'm trying to get direction.
Yeah, because really we're looking at a warning and recommending that they send someone to class. We're not issuing a fine or a loss of license or anything like that, but you still, from a due process, I can see it in your eyes.
Well, I guess from a conservative standpoint, my only concern is that if this will be used in the future, if there's a recurring problem with that establishment, if we use that to now bump up the punishment to another level, will they be able to say they didn't have a right to contest the first level that then knocked them into the second level? So I guess from a creative standpoint, I'll work with the administrator to see if we can maybe compose a letter that safeguards their rights under the statute, but also affords them the opportunity to waive the right to the hearing if they want to and accept the warning, so that it gives them the opportunity to respond, but doesn't necessitate that they come in here.
We want to just continue it.
So I would recommend that you continue it for this evening, and we can take it up at the next meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move in that we continue this discussion on this issue until our next meeting.
Okay. Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just on another note on that sting operation, there were 4 establishments that did not sell to minors, and they asked for the ID, and the kids that we used to go in there witnessed them ask other people for IDs, and we just want to commend those that are really being vigilant and checking IDs, and we appreciate it.
Okay. Next on the agenda, Mark, is the special police officer situation for Officer Burke.
Okay, the special police officer situation. There will be no doubt in your mind how I stand on that when I'm through here this evening. I'm adamantly opposed to any special police officers on the department. We don't have any, and I see very little, if any, benefit for the town or the department, special police officers. I see a huge exposure for liability. Um, uh, Departments across the state have horror stories. The Mass Chiefs of Police don't recommend it. I'm sure, I'm not even sure whether it's legal to appoint someone over the age of 65 to a special police officer. And it'll open a whole can of worms. You'll have all kinds of people. I've had, over the years, a minimum 100 people ask me to be special police officers. Other people that have retired, dispatchers, people that have gone to part-time academies. I just see no benefit in it. There's little control that I have over a special police officer. Can't suspend him. He doesn't work for me. He doesn't, can't dock his pay, can't make him do punishment duty. I see no benefits. I just see a huge exposure to liability for the town. So I'm opposed to having any special police officers. I'm disappointed in the way that it came up. I was never asked. Okay, it seemed like there was some urgency when I went on vacation that we had to have a special police officer right away. And the gentleman that's looking for the position isn't retiring until the end of August. But there was an urgency when I was on vacation that we needed a special police officer in the town of Clinton, that someone that already has the authority. I'm disappointed in you, Steve. Disappointed in you.
Well, Chief, you mentioned that point. No one did it because you were on vacation, so I take exception to the fact that...
Don't tell me that.
Well, that's your opinion, Chief, and that's not the way it was meant. So if you take it like that, I apologize for that, but it's not the way it was. I didn't even know you were on vacation, Chief.
And then when it was asked, I think we should speak to the chief before this happens. You still wanted to push it through. Furthermore, if an officer comes over and asks you for favors, it's against department policy to be asking the board or anyone else to have undue influence on decisions for favors. It's against our rules over at the police department to be looking for favors, either assignments, promotions, or special police officers. And anyone that looks for that is subject to discipline. And that's going to be looked into. And in the future, any issue that comes up with the police department, I would hope that you would give me the courtesy of a phone call to let you know how that would impact us. Impact the town, impact the department. You can set a lot of precedents here. Like I said, a lot of people have asked me for these special positions, and I've said no to them all. And I'm dead set against them. I don't see any benefit to the town.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Sure.
Chief, in your time being here, has any other officer, when they're about to retire within the year, say, have they ever come to you and asked to be a special police officer?
Yes.
So they could, do details, obviously light work.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And your feeling on that every time you've been against it?
Been against it, yes.
Chief, what would be some of the liabilities? Can you elaborate on that?
You have liabilities if he gets hurt. You own him. After age 65, he's not even, there's question whether he's covered under 111F insurance for the town. You're going to have increased liability. Your law enforcement liability policy is determined by the number of officers you have. So you're going to be paying increased liability. He gets hit by a car. You got to pay every hospital bill on there. He makes an arrest. I know all these guys never make an arrest, not going to make an arrest. They'll make an arrest. They do. I'm just telling you the experiences that other towns have had. There's just a whole range of issues. Certifications run out. Every officer has to be certified yearly. Each officer has to go to in-service yearly to be recertified in CPR and first responder. They run out. Law changes. They don't get the updates on the laws. There's a whole huge issue of liability. It's a bad, bad practice, in which the town gains very little, if anything.
Mark, one more question.
Yeah.
Chief, on the direction on a special police officer, you as chief can't direct this special police officer to do a detail or what have you, anything that you see fit?
When I'm saying control, if the officer disobeys my order, what authority do I have on him? I can't suspend him, I can't give him punishment duty, I can reprimand him and tell him not to do it.
Can't you relieve him of his duties?
I can tell him, I can say, yeah, okay, you're no longer going to... Personally, I would probably have the authority of him to assign him details, and I just wouldn't do it anyways. You could appoint, if you appointed him special police officer, I wouldn't assign him any, I wouldn't expose the town to that liability. And myself, I'm named in every lawsuit. I was in Superior Court today.
There were other issues that, and it was the majority of the board, Mark. I know you were concerned about being on vacation. We did feel, that it was important to get your...
And I appreciate that, Mark, and I appreciate that, Mary Rose, and I appreciate that, that you held off and you waited. I appreciate that. I'm sorry I didn't mention that initially.
I just, because the board did take into consideration that you were away, and we did want to get your input before we took any action. We also had concern regarding retirement and issues with retirement, and I know, Mike, you got some answers, or Dennis, you got some answers as well from the state regarding the whole issue of retirement and the age, and also how compensation works with retirement. If you could elaborate on that for the board so that they can...
Well, I had what I did at the town accountant who sits on the retirement board. I asked her these questions. She indicated that for retirement purposes, that the position, that there was question whether or not the position could be appointed while the person was still active employee. That the person would have to be retired and then appointed. And secondly, if they were appointed, they would have to monitor their salary, their income, because the income they make, their retirement check plus the income they make as a special police officer cannot exceed the amount that they were receiving while they were an active employee. So that would have to be monitored. And the state retirement board, again, as the chief alluded to, that after 65, there's a mandatory retirement age for police officers at 65 years old. So again, there was a question as to whether or not you could legally appoint someone as a police officer after 65 years old, whether it was active, special, reserve, whatever you may call them, if they're a police officer, it's mandatory retirement. They indicated, they gave verbal answers. They indicated they would do a written request. If they received a written request, they would do a written reply, if they received a written request. So those were some of the insurance issues. Professional liability, retirement issues. Professional liability would be covered as long as the employee would be part of the town payroll. They would cover professional liability. Disability insurance coverage, if the person got hurt on the job, the insurance would cover the medical portion, but they would not cover disability portion. So if the person makes an allegation that they would no longer be able to make income or do another job because of their injury, our insurance would not cover that. They would have to make a claim to Social Security or some other venue that our insurance would not cover the town. So whether that goes to Social Security or comes back on the town, our insurance company would be out of it at that point, but they would cover medical payments. So that was retirement insurance issues, and I don't know if there were any other legal statutory issues that you commented.
No, just there is a statute in Massachusetts that creates the right for municipalities to appoint special police officers. That has to be accepted by local option. I have checked with the clerk's office. According to some records from the clerk's office, I believe several decades ago that there was a comparable provision accepted. The statute allows for old versions of the statute to be accepted. So it appears that there is the ability of the selectmen to go ahead and appoint a person as a special police officer because it's been accepted according to the town clerk's records. The issue on the retirement issue, my understanding is that at the age of 65, a person can, at the age of 65, it's mandatory retirement for police, that would apply to a special police officer also. That's my understanding of what PERIC's decision is. They have not provided that in writing. If you want that in writing, I could ask them to provide that in writing to the board. And then the liability issues as far as insurance goes, Michael's covered that. The professional liability insurance coverage would be available like it would be for any police officer, but they would be covering medical bills only. Any other bills with regard to a claim for disability would have to go through other avenues such as Social Security disability and things of that nature. There would be an issue as to whether or not somebody has to be retired before they can actually be appointed to the position. My understanding is that previously, in another position, an individual held a town position and then wanted to be appointed to something, and I believe the PERIC had given the decision that the person needed to retire before they could actually receive that. I think it was a part-time position or whatever the position was.
Just last year where there's a number of months that had to go by, but that wasn't, I guess the issue of age and being a police officer is the biggest legal issue that would block this thing at 65.
Just, well, again, my feelings on it, you know, if you want to do people political favors, please don't hand out badges. It's a bad policy.
Not a political favor. I don't like it.
Of course it's a political favor.
No, it's not that.
Then what is it?
Don't even go there.
What is it, Steve?
Don't go there.
Okay.
If they're doing illegal shit, they don't do that.
Rather than go forward with that, what's the pleasure of the board regarding the special police officer request that was made last meeting?
Well, I move that we go along with the chief's recommendation and deny the request.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Just under discussion.
Sorry.
I guess what Solicitor Sergeant is telling us that once a person's 65 and over, they're no longer it's a moot point because they can't serve anyways. So it really doesn't, I mean, if the person was, 55, 60, could do it for some time.
Might even do it while they're on, not on active duty.
No, I'm saying once a person's retired, if the person was, under the age 65, he could do it. But seeing this is a moot point because the individual is turning 65 this year or so.
But I think, it has to be recognized the position of the chief is going to be consistent regardless of age. He doesn't think it's the right policy, so it's not one individual. It's going to be a consistent position by the chief, so it's not just an age issue. From the chief's perspective, he doesn't think it's the right thing to do for the town. So the motion's been made to not move forward with a special police officer position. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up is committee reports, Recycling Commission.
That's just an item, Mr. Chairman. In order to accept the grant position that we have, we received, we need a buy recycled policy in place in town. I don't have a copy of that, so if the board wants to take action on endorsing a policy, or if they want to see a copy of it, we have not finalized a draft of that policy, but we have received the grant, and in order to finalize the paperwork, we need to have this buy recycle policy on file. And I haven't been able to find one on file at the town of Clinton. I don't know whether it's been done previous, so I just wanted to see if the board would entertain, ratifying that and endorsing the policy so that we would have it. But again, I don't have it, anything in writing, so if you want to hold off on it, we can, or if you want to endorse the concept, that we can move forward.
I'll entertain a motion that we, is there a motion to endorse a policy?
I'll make the motion to endorse it because I think it's something we should act on promptly.
Is there a second? Mary Rose seconds that. Any other discussion? So this is an endorsement of a policy. Michael, you'll write a draft policy for us then to approve at our next meeting or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be just a policy that would encourage departments to buy recycled products first.
Yeah.
So if there's something that's comparable value, that
Good.
meets their specs, that they would go after that product before new.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Committee reports?
Committee reports. The Town Hall Renovations Committee met again tonight, and I just wanted to update. I don't have a clean copy here, but we will the next meeting with everything that we've expended and what we've done to this point. But on the plaque for the front of the building, there was a little mix-up in being that originally we proposed to do Clinton Town Hall 242 Church Street on the other side. And when the draft came back, before they physically did it, there was a misunderstanding, and all of it was done on huge lettering, and it wasn't what we wanted. To make a long story short, the committee voted tonight to go forward, but only with one, and it would be 28 inches by 18. The entire granite piece out in front, if you took each one, is 36 inches. So this would be 28. Really nice bronze plaque type of thing, and Tom is here if you want to speak to it, but we also incorporated here that it would have the date of the building, but there would only be one. So we're hoping that 4 to 6 weeks, Tom? About 4 to 6 weeks when it'll finally be in place.
Right.
But we
Nah, just kidding, just kidding. You missed the town there, Tom.
I know. But there are just a few more items that we have to address, but I think we've done a lot with the money that we have, and we still have some left to complete what needs to be done, but we'll have a clean copy for the next meeting.
Okay. I know the Little League, Mark was kind enough to represent the board last Sunday, I believe, to celebrate their 50 years of service and providing the youth of Clinton. This is a nice plaque that was presented to the town. I'm not sure if the camera can get it without my third chin in the way. And also a trophy, which I won when I was 13. No, actually, both the plaque and the trophy were presented to the town of Clinton and the Clinton Little League for 50 years of service in the community, and I'd like to thank Mark.
And Selectman Mendoza was there also.
Oh, and Stephen, okay.
Yeah.
I saw your mug in the paper, so
You
I
got there
figured you were
late,
the
so
only guy.
I got the benefit of the picture.
So Mark and Steve for being there, and most importantly to appreciation of their continued support of the youth of Clinton, the Little League baseball. I know that's where dreams and memories are had. So it's great to have the volunteers that run both the minor league and in this instance here the Little League baseball down at Vale Street. So hope they have a great season with few rainouts and lots of memories. So we'd like to thank them for the trophies. Are they going in any particular on top of you?
I think, as Selectman Yakabuchi indicated, that your Holder Memorial, I think, is willing to take them, put them on display.
That'd be great. That'd be great. So again, I appreciate both selectmen making an appearance there. Under public comment, is there any public comment? I'm not sure.
I'm Richard Hart, Fire Chief.
Good evening, Rich.
A week and a half ago, I was a little disheartened to pick up the newspaper, read that one of our biggest fire and life safety hazards in town, that's been #1 priority for the fire department for probably the last 5 years, but we've been dealing with the demo committee for the last 2, is just dismissed.
Well, I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to dismiss it, because that was a misquote in the paper. It wasn't just dismissed. It was, we had dismissed the issue with the demolition board several times. You folks have brought that forward. And as a board, we have articulated a commitment to resolve that site, but we have to have the funding to resolve the entire site. So to knock something down or a piece of fencing, we have legal issues as far as gaining access to the site that our former Director of Economic Development worked and was attempting to get settled, that's still not settled. So there are more issues than just let's start taking down the back of that building. This board is committed to hopefully finding the funding to get that site resolved, but we do not have the funding to address that site today.
The issue that they brought forth from the demo committee was not to go down and take that building down. Their intent was to get it on the list. I've got a court appearance in Housing Court next Wednesday morning. I believe I'm waiting for the return on the services. I've served a trustee in Virginia. I've served a trustee in Florida and Sudbury. I expect to be there, and I expect a representative, whether it's them or their attorney.
And you've
If
worked
we
in
have an
conjunction with town
access,
solicitor?
pardon?
And you've worked in conjunction with town solicitor? on
I've
this?
worked with him step by step. He's well aware of what I've been doing. It's been my hope that we'd at least have this on the list. Not saying we're spending a dime, but now we go in. And if we can get an access agreement prepared for the judge next Wednesday, we may make headway with getting whatever access we need.
But we do not have the funds to address that site with the current amount of money we have allotted in our demolition. So we've held discussions with the demolition committee, and we held discussions with the economic director. He's conveyed a strong desire to work very diligently to try and come up with alternative grants and funding wherever we may be able to find them to address the entire site. But to absorb that site now without the resources to really address it would put a huge burden on this community.
I honestly feel there's ignorance in your appraisal of the situation.
I feel there's ignorance on your part, Richard.
Well,
because
nobody's
I'm
got
telling you right
assessments.
now, we don't have access to that site. We don't have the money to clean that site up. And I'm not quite sure how often we have to tell you no, but we've said it several times in a demolition meetings with the committee, and you continue not to hear this board. We've said no.
So you're just washing out the life safety of the firefighters and the people at large.
But we have discussed this several times with you and the rest of the committee, that until we have the funding to address the entire site, and that we had, first step was access, then it was, do we have the funding to address the entire site? We do not have either of those. So as time dwindles down on a demolition grant, it's not prudent to even be addressing a site that far exceeds the cost of what we have currently in our grant. So we have to be careful, and we have to use physical responsibility in what we do at this table, and we've discussed it with you folks.
I haven't seen a quote. Maybe you have a secret one somewhere.
There was a quote
Mr.
delivered to
Chairman.
the former Director of Economic Development that was over $280,000.
May that be shared with the rest of us?
The Economic Director had conversations with the contractors that put in the quote well over a year ago. Mike, you may have a copy of it as well. But I know it exceeded the amount that we had available.
If that's the wishes of the board, I can back off. I'll just cancel the whole thing next Wednesday and leave it up to you to pursue it. I just don't think that we can...
When did you get the misdirection from the board that we wanted anything other than access on that site?
You just want to dismiss it.
We don't want to dismiss it.
If I don't have...
But when did we give you direction to go put that on a demolition site? We in fact said several times not to.
This is not on the demolition site, the hearing Wednesday morning. That is the fire department taking them to court over the sprinklers, over the oil tank, in other issues.
But we were talking, what we quote dismissed a meeting ago was the concept of putting that building on the demolition list. This board met with the demolition committee several times, and we said no. Several times, not once.
I'm telling you, you
fellow
got
members,
a safety
cheer up
hazard
here.
down there.
If I'm off base, maybe, when my head was spinning, I forgot something. But I'm telling you, we met several times and we voted several times that was not going to be accepted.
Let's turn the $250,000 back to the state. It'll do us all good, rather than put it into something we can take down. That building, to take the rear down, would be under $200,000. But you don't want to
But
get a
you
quote
don't have
from-
a quote for us tonight that says that.
I could have, put it on the demolition
Mr. Chairman,
list. I'm not looking for money,
Yeah,
Mark.
Mr. Chairman, my concern is when Claire O'Neill was here as the former Community Economic Development Director, and we sat with the demolition committee, we had very grave concerns about the fact, and she was adamant about it, we're not proceeding cautiously in getting the permission that we needed to do, to go in and do environmental impact study on that building. If we went in, let's just say we took the $250,000, took down the back end, we own that. We've bought into that, and that's only a small portion of that. And I think what the chairman is saying, and I would concur with him, that we are taking on, we're not saying that something doesn't have to be done in the future. Definitely does. But we do not have the means. I think that you yourselves quoted, with your building inspector and yourself as committee members, that it would take at least $1 million to clean up that site.
That's never been my figure.
Well, listen,
That
I
was-
must have the same illness you have.
That was,
because I-
that was conveyed to us in demolition committee meetings, that site would be over $1 million to clean up. And that's what the board went with and said, listen, we are so far out of the ball, we are not gonna put that tax burden on this community. We do not have the grant funding to take on that entire site. But the commitment is, when we do, this board will be very supportive of that. But we can't spend money, Richard, that we don't have. We don't have
If we don't
that
go
money.
forward at this point, the trustees have already indicated they don't want anything to do with it. They're going to step back. The building's going to fall in someday, hopefully not on somebody, or burn beforehand. And the town of Clinton's going to wind up with it down the road, or it's going to be an open space forever with just rubble on it. It's plain and simple.
It's plain and
pulling
simple
teeth.
that it costs money. There's money involved with dealing with that building that we do not
We've
have.
got $275,000 that we should have available at this point. Oh, sure.
But then you
That's not
have an
gonna cover the-
open-ended, what you're missing is you've opened the door to an unknown cost of the rest of that building that you now have locked our community into having to clean up without any legal, clear path or funding. So you then put on the burden of this community potentially $750,000 or more because you had to. I'd rather not spend $200,000 of free money, but then throw $700,000 or $800,000 on the tax burden of this community. I don't want to do that.
I don't see where you're got to enter both of them together. That's been one of the problems
Well,
with it.
once you've opened the door.
May I finish?
Well,
May I
Richard, I don't
finish?
know. You've told us this before, and we said no.
If I could, the demolition committee was originally set up after the Worcester fire to address the issue of unsafe buildings in town. I think we can agree on that.
No, I believe that was all part of the grant.
It was a grant.
The grant came afterwards.
Right.
Right.
But no, we formed the demolition committee after we were afforded funds, and then we went and put a list together of sites in town, which then, to the private interest, many got cleaned up.
Well-
But it wasn't post the fire risk. It was post the grant that was awarded to the community.
Well, I was misled. The grant came afterwards. We'd already met when we were informed that we did receive the grant. In fact, we were informed initially that she was applying for it. Then we were informed that, and we were already meeting at that time.
Okay, Mark?
I think where the board's coming from, and I think there's some miscommunication. Once we go on that site, even with whatever kind of grant money we get, we own it. And I think that's what the board's saying. We don't want to accept that responsibility. We don't know what we're getting into. Everyone's here committed, if we had the funds and we knew what we had to do, to tear the building down.
We're not
We're
saying
committed
we
to do
wouldn't
it.
help.
We've got two
But once,
different
Chief,
avenues.
once you go in there and tear down a section of it, then the town owns it.
What I was getting to with the demo committee, we've got two different avenues here. We got the economic development aspect that's looking out for make the property totally clean and environmentally safe and marketable to sell it and get it back on the tax rolls. Myself and I believe the building inspector are looking at the safety issues. How can we make this safe? We don't need subsurface remediation to make the building safe. And that's why I'm pursuing it. I'm not saying let's take the property at this time.
But as soon as
Yeah, but as soon as we go
We
on
can
there.
still pursue the subsurface
But as
later.
soon as you enter the property and start to do work,
We own it.
don't know what the end game is. We don't know how much that is going to cost us. And nor do we have the funding to do the rest of that work. So what this board has articulated to the demolition committee several times, Rich, is that once we have funding available to address that entire site, whether it's a 3-step process or a 4-step process, we're committed to doing that. But we are not committed to taking on step 1 without funding for all those extra steps that eventually will fall on the backs of this community without that money. And this board doesn't want to spend that money until we know the path.
Not only the fact the cost of tearing it down, but the cost of, ground contamination, those add up.
We're going to have an unsafe property there, whether we have ground contamination or not, and we're going to own that building.
Let's not go with unsafe properties. The May Barton has been the Alamo for a year now, so that's as unsafe as
Mark,
anything.
the survey committee, that wasn't a safety issue.
Well,
That's an eyesore. That's where economic development, but that went above everything else. Went above the May Barton, it's collapsing.
Right.
It went above Amory.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, Donnie, I know that you're here as Community Development Director, and I know that you've sat with Claire since she's left for Mass Development. I think we're very fortunate that she has assumed the vice presidency position at that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been Claire's concern that, number one, we should follow a very cautious path. And working with Mass Development and working so that we could secure monies so that we could proceed to do an environmental study, a cleanup study in there, and to avoid going in and doing any kind of demolition work on that site. For that very reason that the chairman is saying, now we have committed ourselves and we cannot walk away from it. Are we not correct in that assumption?
Yes, Ms. Diggo, you are correct, and we have had these discussions several times at the demolition committee meeting, and I have expressed, I don't think there's any more important property in town to clean up than Amory. I don't think anybody would dispute that. What I have explained at the demolition meetings and what I've attempted to explain to the board as well is if we have $42,000 already earmarked with Mass Development to do site testing for the site, but we are absent an access agreement. Without an access agreement, we cannot draw down those funds. If we were to pursue brownfields money, which I went to a seminar yesterday, if we went, and I reviewed the new legislation and I talked to the person that would be our state person from the EPA, we cannot, and not us, any community cannot pursue brownfields money unless you own the property. So we would have to have completed the tax taking process before we could pursue brownfield money. So absent an access agreement and absent title, what would be left, it would be to add the property to the demolition list, get the approval from the state, and do something with it. Now, as the chairman has said, we, the town, received, and to be fair, it wasn't a quote, it was an estimate. I learned a week or two ago that one of the local contractors gave the building inspector last year an estimate of $280,000 to take down the rear portion of the building, assuming a clean site. And I think that would be a very tenuous assumption at best. I think it would be a very pleasant surprise to find out that it's a very clean site. I've also had conversation with the state, with DHCD, to talk about getting what their feeling would be about adding Amory to the list if the request did come from the town at the direction of the Board of Selectmen. And using my terminology, not necessarily theirs, absent an exit strategy, meaning we go in, yes, if we, even arguably if we could take the entire $250,000 or whatever it is, which is questionable because we do have one other site pending, and we don't have resolution on yet. If we could take the entire $250,000 and apply it to that, they were not necessarily comfortable with just going forward with doing that to make the site even arguably better. It's to make it safe in the sense that the site would be cleared, and that if we remove the rear structure of the building, that the town would need to make safe the remaining structure, so that, and demolition funds would not be applicable for that we would have to appropriate other funds, whether it be from the $25,000 that the town has earmarked for demolition or whatever. But we can only use demolition grant money for demolition. And the state would want to see what the plan is for the site, that they didn't necessarily object to having it as a component of a larger plan. But I think they were pretty much saying what the chairman is saying, is that they would like to see it in the context of a larger plan. I am absolutely committed to do whatever I can to find money to addressing. I think I would agree we don't have any more important site in town than that, because I do think we have a potential, not potential, we do have a safety hazard down there. But I do believe it's beyond the scope of what we can do with the demolition funding that we have now, that we could, yes, we could take down a portion of that, I believe. We couldn't take down the entire rear, but we could probably take down a portion of it and make the site better. But that's not, that's a portion of a larger strategy, and I think the board has been very clear about, I've received the message in the 4 months that I've been here now. It's unambiguous to me that you want to see a plan basically from soup to nuts. How are we going to deal with the entire structure? I'm hopeful that lined up, if we can line up appropriate funding and pursue some avenues that I've just learned about in the past day or so, that maybe we could take the site part of the way and make it attractive for a developer to then come in and finish. So maybe we don't have to, eat the whole elephant. But the bottom line is, if we don't have an access agreement, there's no funding for mass development. If we don't own the property, there's no brownfields money. So we do have hurdles to overcome before we can attach any money like that to it. And again, the state was not overly receptive about about adding this to the demolition list and moving forward without being able to look at the context of
being able to complete a project.
That's right.
We have to understand the entire scope of something before we start. That's our responsibility. It's our responsibility, both physically and as town leaders, to understand when we start something, how do we complete it, and what the cost is. And for us to make a decision or to enter into something without those facts, it would be negligent on all of our parts up here. It would be negligent. We would be throwing a huge burden on this community by just saying, well, we don't know what it costs, but you know what? We'll do it anyway. We can't do it.
To do nothing, you're going to be negligent. I think the building inspector and myself have made it quite clear to the board who we work for that we have the problem. We need your help. We need your help. And to read that it's dismissed.
We told you we will help you when we have a game plan that shows us the funding to support the project being completed and what all the steps are. But to just bang down the gates and start something without the financial plan as to how you're going to get it accomplished will not be supported by this board. And we've told your demolition committee several times that same thing. So we haven't wavered at all. We're committed to getting it fixed? Yeah. But the state,
you're committed.
The state and this board agree on how we should spend money.
You're just going a lot further than I'm desiring. I've got a headache down there with safety. I want to address the safety. Environmental and the rest of the building can come later. I don't see where, and I would think the attorney, our town council should be able to help us on this, whether we can make it safe.
You're separating the two, and you can't.
It should be. The safety is the imminent hazard. It's a thing of today. We've got to get it taken care of. Normally, when we have a building like that, we're supposed to be able to serve process. The town is supposed to go in and take it down, and I believe we've got funding with $200,000 to take the rear section down.
But that doesn't fix your problem.
It does. It takes the safety issue away, Mr. Chairman.
Rather than belate this, we got your point. Unless any other members of the board want to chime in, we're consistent with our position. when the full game plan and financials can be put together, the court process regarding access moves forward, then we can begin to entertain this more. But at this point, based on a prior Director of Economic Development and our current, we can't get on site. You guys are working the court process, go right ahead with solicitor, and when we have more facts and figures, we can do something. But we're not gonna dive into something, Richard, without having full understanding. We just won't do it.
I'd like to make a statement. As Chief of Department, you should definitely set the way you would attack a fire there or a problem there without causing your men any harm. I mean, it's an empty building. Do they have to go in?
Let's look back to December 3rd, 1999. You got a vacant building, you know, that's been vacant for a number of years. Sprinklers have been turned off, windows boarded up, fairly secure building. 6 o'clock at night, you get a fire inside. You respond. You have no accidental cause for that fire whatsoever. The power had been shut off, the gas had been shut off, supposedly no one had been in there. So there's only one element left, and it's a human element. Whether it's a vagrant that's affording himself protection in a building like that, or a young child that was in there mischievously playing with matches. We've got to at least make an earnest effort to ensure that the child is out, that the vagrant is out. Hopefully it's in a safe manner.
But you have
But
an
we've
attack
got-
plan for that. You would do that in any building.
Right, but we've got to enter it, Dean. It's not as though we put them placards on to warn the other communities that it's unsafe. Our firefighters, I would hope, understand that it's unsafe, but we've still got to take them risks to ensure that we're not going to wind up with another incident like we had at Turner Hall a number of years ago, back in the 60s, where 2 days later we find a young child.
But you can't say this board is causing your men any harm or wanting to cause them any harm. That's the way they need to proceed.
They're not intentionally, but I don't think the owner of the Worcester Cold Storage intentionally did any firefighter any harm either.
But we're not the owners of that building.
No. We're going to be. We're going to be, and that's where we're headed.
With that fire, you're so out of line there, it isn't funny. Don't go there.
I'm there.
That was tragic.
I'm there, and it's a
event.
concern.
You should have that concern every day of your life as a fire chief, that you're concerned about your men, and I hope you do. And many citizens in this town are concerned about our policemen and our firemen every day of the week. And we don't wish anyone any safety issues. But we are in a position that we have to be business managers of the community. We don't trade off safety for dollars, but when we don't have it, we don't have it, and we can't write checks. Unless you want to contribute your salary for the next 20 years before you retire, we can pool that money, and building inspector can pool his money, and that's a step in the right direction. But let's be reasonable, folks, because I know you're not going to do that. We have to get funding from the state, and we have to figure out how to do it. And that means you sit down and you put a game plan together with the economic development director, and you figure out how to attack the plan.
Mr. Chairman, if the game plan isn't ready Wednesday morning, there won't be anything further I can do. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? What I would like to do with an election coming up is at least wish our two sitting board members good luck in next Monday's election.
Thank you.
And also pass along my gratitude of sitting with you both for the past 2 years. And I appreciate the efforts and the commitment that you've both made and your honest attempts to serve this community. And I think you should be, anybody that sits up here at this board and deals with the things that we deal with, those candidates that are also running, it's an appreciation that I have that you both have spent honest, hard-working years here, and whatever the results are on Monday, I wish you both the very best, and I do appreciate serving on the board with both of you, so I thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, that being said, I don't know if there's any other public comment. Being none? Oh, we still have executive session. Yes. We will now entertain a motion to go into executive session under Article 3 for the police union negotiations.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call votes required. Mark?
Aye.
Mary Rose?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We also have another Article 3 executive session, two of them, one on streetscape and one on the water fluoridation plan. That'll be it for this evening.